With the World Championship 2024 concluded and the March 2025 ban restricted list effective, the Digimon card game is pretty much unified across the 3 major different languages, including English, Japanese, and Chinese. This is really cool to see that we're all at the same page, cooking up and brewing up completely different builds, coming up and sharing with different ideas for the BT20 format after the post-ban list. So today I want to talk about all the best decks that we can expect to do well in the competitive scene within the BT20 format, starting with the top 4 decks that were featured in the most recent World Championship event. Starting off in 4th place, we got the Virus Red-Purple Imperialdramon deck, which I pretty much started playing as soon as it came out in EX3. Upgrading the builds into BT16, and with the BT20 cards, it gave a full power line of support, which mainly comes with the new Virus Fighter mode. This card can floodgate the opponents from playing any Digimon or Tamers by effect, which includes when you check them upon security. It also has a powerful removal tool of its own, which can delete or raid into the opponent's Digimon. Synergizing with the EX3 Dragon mode, you force your opponents to choose one Digimon, delete everything else, and then as you attack and blitz, you go into the Virus Fighter mode, clearing that one and final thing, wiping out their entire board. The new Dragon Mode Ace is a nice tech as it gives a bit of counterplay while you're standing your level 5s, as you can blast DNA Digivolve into it when your opponent attacks into you. Afterwards, you can also go into fighter mode during your opponent's turn instead of your own. BT16 Dino B is still the main MVP as it can play out any level 5 or lower Digimon that is within the archetype from the trash, and that will ideally be your Imperialdramon or another Dino Bmon. The new one gives you DP power and piercing buff to either itself or even Dino B, as you can synergize with each other to make an attack while you rush after DNA Digivolving. And it also gives you deletion mitigation via effect or even by battle just by simply DNA Digivolving your Imperialdramon and Dino Bmon on the board into a Dragon mode for free. The deck is now super fast and consistent at setting up your cards that you need in your hand and in your trash at the same time, with Vmon as your draw power, Wormmon as search, and the BT16 Wormmon specifically to digivolve anything that you need from the trash and you can combo off. The promo Shadramon can instantly dish out any of your rookies back from the trash, utilizing their on-play effects, giving you an extra body, which is pretty much equivalent to the Davis and Ken of the blue-green Imperialdramon deck itself. Afterwards, you digivolve that into another level 4, and then you continue to DNA off. And yes, one of the biggest problems that I will admit is the price and accessibility of the promo Shadramon, which is incredibly important to the core of the deck, where you definitely want to be playing as a 4 of. Even though most of us already know that this card is going to be reprinted in the latest event pack for the upcoming competitive season right off the bat, I still think that this card needs to be further accessible, whether if it's going to be another box topper with a different art, reprinted in the LM set, or even included in the regular tournament pack that you get for participating locals. I agree that this card needs to be further more accessible than it currently is. By DNA Digivolving into your level 5s and then your 6s in the same turn, you get to slow down your opponent's win con and deal a ton of damage at the same time. Once the stack has been established, you can easily float bodies back out if your opponent ever tries to threat into it, where you can use Partition to play out your level 4s, or use the promo Shadramon Inherited to play out any of your rookies, so then you can continue to loop your combos all over again. Sometimes the memory gauge doesn't even matter for this deck because the BT16 Wormmon gets to be played out and instantly lets you digivolve, and you get to resolve and stack all those effects as you climb back up to your 5 and then your 6s before your turn passes to your opponent. I would definitely expect to see this deck being represented in many high-level tournaments, especially because the most recent ban list announcement did not affect it at all, and this is my most current iteration of it. If you guys enjoy watching deck lists and discussion videos like these for every format, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell to stay tuned. And you guys can even join the AVAULT Club to see all the future deck lists I work on even before the set comes. And I appreciate the support from all of you. Since the deck is combo heavy, I always recommend spending the time to practice with it as much as possible, because any micro misplay during the course of the game can lead you to huge disadvantages, which also can cost you your wins. And trust me, I've learned a lot about this deck throughout the entire time, and even still today, I'm trying to master it myself. As powerful as it seems, there are still some downsides with this deck, especially with needing you to gather specific pieces in your trash and in your hand at the same time for specific moments to make clapback plays. And if you're not able to execute it, you're forced to being played from behind, which is a position that you never want to be in. Next, let's talk about the Sakuyamon deck, which came out in 3rd place in the World Championship. Different to the Tau Loop deck, this one focuses more on the core engine of playing Renamon, Cubimon, and Taomon, which is pure yellow all the way up to the line to go into your Sakuyamon. And like we know already, Kuzuhamon got hit on the restriction list so that you can only play one, which makes a lot of sense that more people are going to starting to gear their focuses towards this particular build from now on instead. As you Digivolve up the line, you want to be able to spam your plugin and scramble option cards for free with Taomon, and then going into BT19 Sakuyamon gives you a ton of draw power to keep going with the combos and follow up with a second stack afterwards as well. I absolutely love the Wizardmon in this deck as you get to gain the memory back and draw additional cards when you Digivolve into it, effectively making it a 1-cost Evo for a level 4, and with its inherit effect to provide the stack protection, which is something that's really important that Sakuyamon needs. The main idea is to keep your Sakuyamon on the board alive for as long as possible so that you can spawn your tokens turn after turn. Not only they're just going to be your blockers to help you set up your defenses from your opponents attacking into you, you also get to use them to attack once you establish a board wide enough that you can make multiple swings in one go to finish your opponents off. Same goes with Sakuyamon X as you get to dish out even more tokens that have rush, make attacks, and unsuspend any Digimon that you have to win even faster. The archetype can include multiple different level 7s to push your leads even further. With Ruin mode, you get to lock down your opponents for an entire turn. There is also Chaosmon Voltorarm, which we've seen that synergizes greatly with Sakuyamon X as you Digivolve into it with Yellow Scramble, because you get to unsuspend while making the 2 checks, and then do it again, chunking down all your opponent's security. And the fact that you have a Sakuyamon X and Sakuyamon within the sources allows you to gain 2 memory back off Chaosmon Voltorarm and lock down 2 of their Digimon Tamers and prevent their board from unsuspending for 1 whole turn. Here's my most current iteration of the build, which focuses more on the BT19 Sakuyamon to ensure I draw all the pieces so that I can combo off as efficiently as possible. The reason is because the deck is actually quite prone to breaking at times, and not seeing your pieces to climb all the way up is the whole reason why I included a ton of search cards, maximizing the physical training, Rikas, Renamons, as well as having 2 TKs to help facilitate and ensure I can find everything I need. Other cards that you guys can also include would be the Starmon, which provides barrier covering the weaknesses of Sakuyamon attacking into your opponent's security early, since it only has 11,000 DP, meaning it can very easily be taken out. You can also play Pause Plugin P instead of Noble Family Arts for DP reduction and removal to control the opponent's side of the board. The deck is combo heavy after all, so I recommend practicing with it as much as possible so that you master the sequencing of all the effects. Next up, we got the second place blue-green Imperialdramon deck to talk about. As we know, this deck is always incredibly fast with its aggressive attacks, unsuspension, and can close out games as quickly as possible. As you make multiple attacks with Imperialdramon and unsuspend, you get to draw cards that are not once per turn to find your pieces, as you have easy follow-ups or answers against your opponent's board with Dragon Mode and your Fighter Mode Ace. Davis and Ken to play out your rookies for free and you get to search early. Your top end control consists of Dragon Modes to counter any Digivolving via effects or playing by effects as well. Fighter Mode Ace to bottom deck the opponent's core important stack, and we even seen people started to add in the Virus Fighter mode from BT22 just because of how powerful its effect is, and you can easily Digivolve it through the archetype itself. Players have always been adapting the Hexablaumon to synergize with the source stripping and stunning so that you can also bottom deck your opponent's Tamers. You can easily build a big stack that has many sources with partition, making it not easy to remove at all. Overall, this deck is very easy to learn, to pick up and play, which I definitely recommend for many new players that are looking to get into the game competitively as well. Although the ban list did hit the starter deck Stingmon, which slows down the draws for the deck, but it still will for sure see competitive play. During the time before the ban list was effective, I always personally felt that one of the biggest reasons why Imperialdramon is incredibly good is because of the non-once per turn draw power it has. Because as you get to make those attacks, you draw so much where you play with pretty much whole deck in your hand, meaning that you have easy follow-up in your next turns and even having answers against your opponents at all times, so that your level 6s can pretty much be toolbox into anything that you like. And as a matter of fact, you can play all of them as one-offs and still see all of the pieces that you need to make the counterplay too. So now I am curious to find out whether if that Stingmon hit would actually slow that down by a significant margin or not. There are also easy workarounds for the Star Deck Stingmon, so that you can max out the BT12 Stingmon instead, include additional copies of Leviamon, which can help you remove floodgates, but also being a 2-color Digimon to help you DNA easier for the requirements, and this is my most current build after the post-ban list. We even seen players tech in Medieval Gallantmon, since it's a very strong staple, and at times you could Digivolve into your level 5 since all of them are green. One of the biggest weaknesses of this deck is not seeing your pieces in the early stages of the game, especially establishing Davis and Ken is so important to it so that you can go ahead and start up. But once you pass that hurdle, everything else for the deck just snowballs incredibly fast. And now let's talk about the first place deck, where we have Galaxy Toolbox. The Light Fang and the Nightclaw has always been a powerful engine since its debut in EX5. It can gain a ton of memory and cycle search and draws while climbing up, with your Ko and Sayo being your main memory setter, but also facilitating free evolutions so that you can climb up into whatever you need. By utilizing the engine of the lower end, you now have access to any level 6s that you want as long as they can digivolve on top of red or blue, and it always makes sense to go for the most powerful ones to combat the most recent meta. The BT11 Mirage to floodgate against the opponents from searching or drawing cards by effects, Hexablaumon to bottom deck tamers and stun down the opponent's Digimon while stripping sources. Apollomon being the only red level 6 that is within the archetype can still deal massive security damage into your opponents and delete their Digimon at the same time. We start seeing the inclusion of Invisimon, which can scan the opponent's top security and put in a lot of work, especially in worlds with it being able to de-digivolve and delete as it comes out. Gallantmon X is also useful even without necessarily needing the Gallantmon or regular X Antibody underneath to get the full benefits of effects. The fact that you can still delete the opponent's Digimon or trash the opponent's security and unsuspend all in one go is still very powerful. This gives the deck choices to also play the Paladin Mode Ace and the new Omnimon X to synergize with each other. Although I'm not an expert on this archetype, but here is the deck list of the first place champion. Furthermore, the banner restriction list did not affect this deck at all as nothing got hit, and you can make an argument that BT11 Mirage was part of the hit, but as you guys can see, the deck list only really played one to begin with anyways. So that wraps up for all the top 4 decks of the Worlds format. But now let's talk about all the other ones that we can still also expect to do well, starting with Royal Knights. The archetype has become ever faster than before in winning games because it no longer just only requires the BT13 Omni combo in order to have a lot of sources underneath the Kingdra cell to pop off, because you can do that way earlier and still finish your opponents. Part of that is the inclusion of the newer strategy where you can float Omecamons consistently and chip the opponent's security in the early stages. The new Omecamon can even help you warp into an Omni X so that you can board wipe against your opponents. The combination gives you a huge threat during the opponent's turn, which is kind of like in acing against them once the specific conditions are met. Cool Boy being the dedicated tamer gives a ton of value in every turn for more draw and memory gain, and it allows you to play even more cards every turn. Last Guardian for searching consistency and protecting your Omnimons. Aside from all those new features, Royal Knights has always been known to be really good at controlling the flow of the game, whether by slowing down the opponent's win con with its removal effects, which is mainly going to be deleting their Digimon turn after turn, and setting up blockers for defense to stop and slow down the opponent's attacks at the same time. Medieval Gallantmon is also a common inclusion, even though it is not a Royal Knight itself, but it works well together to further remove even more bodies turn after turn and chunk down your opponent's security with damage to win faster thanks to its alliance ability. Royal Knights is a Mega Zoo style deck after all, meaning that your security could be loaded up with big DP Digimon, meaning in certain matchups, if your opponent doesn't swing with bigger DP than it is, you can easily trade against their Digimon and take them down so that you neutralize their value on their side. One of the most fun things about Royal Knights is actually the deck building portion of it, because there's so many different Royal Knight trait cards that you can access in the card pool. You guys can always splash into whatever you want to customize the build into your own personal playstyle and liking to also adapt to the meta. But this is where one of the biggest challenges comes in, because you need to play strategically as you play very few cards per turn. But those plays are going to matter, meaning managing the memory gauge is really important, because you need to think about when to give your opponent a lot or little memory at the right times. Understanding the matchup is really crucial when it comes to understanding what your opponent's win con is and what you need to do to slow them down. Because the core of how you build a Royal Knights deck has really unusual ratios, especially when you compare it to the traditional stack-based building decks or decks that digivolve upwards. You're going to often find yourself with a very different hand every single time, and it's really important to make sure that you know how to interact and synergize and combo those different cards to help you adapt to the situations to gain as much advantage as possible so that you don't fall behind. And since we're talking about Royal Knights, we also got to mention Gallantmon. Most of the support came out from EX8, which gave the X Antibody line the perfect synergy it needed to climb up and build the optimal stack. And with BT2.5, it gave it a little bit of an extra sprinkle of firepower, especially coming down with the new Tocado that is a memory setter, but also letting you raid and attack when you digivolve just before your turn ends, pretty much like the old one with Blitz. This allows it to become just like the BT12 Gallantmon as another source of removal to swing over your opponent's Digimon aside from relying on deletion-based effects. There's also the new Wargreymon Ace now to counter against the opponents whenever they attack into you, and the wider board they have, the greater it can punish by popping multiple things, stealing the turn back with its memory gain effect too. Its inherit effect even takes your DP based deletion effects to the whole new level by increasing the threshold by a huge amount. The new Groundmon also lets you play Takados for free from your hand as long as you have one or fewer tamers when you digivolve into it, and that is why you tend to want to build your stack outside in the battle area to utilize as many of these when digivolving effects as possible. And as for the new Gallantmon, you can gain additional memory at the start of your main phase and also bump up your DP based deletion effects by another 2000 with its inherit effect. Now I know we recently just got these new cards to play with, but the crazier thing is that we're going to be getting another round of support with the full Magnamon line in BT21, and I'm very sure some of those cards are going to be applicable to power up Gallantmon even further. Since Gallantmon is a red-based deck after all, it focuses on a linear playstyle to build into your big boss Digimon where you rely everything on that one single stack. But once you get into it, you get tons of benefits with its inherit effects and immunity that is not easy for your opponents to remove at all. Gallantmon can deal tons of damage by unsuspending with multiple checks in one go and also trash your opponent's security to give you guaranteed wins. Because this is a stack-based deck after all, that means you want to try to build your optimal stack by having your Gallantmon and Groundmons and also weaving in your X Antibody forms in between to get your max amount of benefits within your one single boss Digimon. But keep that in mind, it's kind of sometimes hard to gather all those pieces in the early stages of the game where you can find yourself building a suboptimal stack, but even at times you might brick, giving you a very rough start. But despite that, don't let that deter you from playing one of your favorite personal Digimon out there just because Gallantmon is going to continue to be really strong moving forward as well. As we move on, I want to talk about another fellow Royal Knight, which is Magnamon X Antibody. We all know how powerful this card alone is, as it can become immune to absolutely everything, meanwhile gaining DP and unsuspending with blocker that is not easy to overcome at all. Although the recent announcement has restricted blinding rate down to 1, which is intended to prevent players from preemptively giving the Magna X immunity, but we have seen players been cooking up other new builds and different versions of it, and who would have thought of them utilizing the BT20 white Royal Knight cards in the deck as well, creating a fantastic engine and a whole new way to play it too. The new Kuboy, Omekamon, and Omni X fits perfectly into this deck. And like I mentioned before for Royal Knights, Kuboy gives a ton of value in return to the whole deck because it focuses on digivolving into Magnamon, which is a Royal Knight to begin with. Omni X is a powerful top end card which can easily be splashed into any blue or red based decks, and obviously it can go on top of Magnamon X instead of just only Omekamon to make multiple attacks and close out games and even have that immunity. And since it includes the whole package, Kuboy allows you to play out your Omekamon whenever your Magnamons are in threat. And if you have one or fewer security, you can instantly go into Omni X just like the Royal Knights deck as well. And that is why the regular X Antibody option is also included, as you want to digivolve while attacking with your Magna X to gain the maximum benefits of the X Antibody. This is also beneficial for Megaseedramon X as the new level 5 that used to be BT19 Huankunmon to utilize its inherit effect to dodge any redirects. But now with Megaseedramon X, you can bottom deck your opponent's level 4 and even stun down one of their Digimon for a whole turn. By mixing all these cards into the deck, it gives the archetype new offensive tools to close games even faster. And with all the hype that we're getting with Magna X coming back again recently, I'm really curious to see how it's going to be performing, especially when BT21 comes out, because we'll be getting even more new support with new armor trait Digimon that is specifically for Vmon as well. Next, I want to talk about Leviamon, which I have mentioned on the channel before. This is one of the best decks out there that counters any strategies that plays Digimon via effects. As the meta shifts towards to some of these decks that I talked about earlier becoming more and more popular, Blue-Green Imperial plays out Digimon with Davis and Ken. Red-Purple Virus Imperial plays Digimon off Shadowmon and Dino B. Sakuyamon that plays tokens. And even Royal Knights as they play out Omekamons through Kuboy or even Omnimon from BT13. This is where Leviamon can thrive within the competitive environment to counter against all of them. Furthermore, the Dark Animal engine consisting of Dobermon and Cerberusmon X was untouched in the ban list, which provides purple stack-based decks one of the most consistent ways to draw and trash to find their pieces as they climb up. The archetype has many different ways to delete bodies on the opponent's side of the board, with Leviamon popping multiple things. Biting Crush setting up as a face-up trap, Seventh Lightning as another trap when you go into Levia X, which can even delete Tamers. Although the deck doesn't have much protection, it does have recursion thanks to Protoform being able to recycle your sources, but the whole idea is also to utilize your Leviamon and Leviamon X to deal multiple damage into your opponent's security with a ton of checks and massive DP before they're even able to answer them. Here's my most current iteration of the deck, and as some of you guys may have noticed, it pretty much hasn't changed at all when compared to the last couple of formats. The only slight tweaks are really coming down to the Floodgate rookies to tailor the ratios depending on what you needed for the meta. The nature of the deck is to try and build a stack after all, where there are times that you can't find your optimal pieces, and because the deck itself includes a lot of top hand heavy cards which you might end up seeing in your opening hand, which is not ideal. Therefore, in order to mitigate that, I try to compensate by including as many search options as possible, which I definitely recommend. With BT21 coming around the corner, I'm definitely most excited for this one because it's going to be the first ever set that is going to be released globally across all the different languages. So definitely make sure to subscribe, turn on that notification bell to stay tuned as I'll be covering a ton of new decks. Also make sure to check out the AVAULT store and grab yourself some awesome merch, which really helps support the channel, and I appreciate the support. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. You guys have a great day, great night, wherever you are. See you in the next video, and this is AVAULT signing out.